Okay, so first of all, welcome everyone for today's webinar and Sunday evening. And before we officially open our discussion, we would like to give the introduction to the TYS chapter Cambodia through our short clip video in order for you to understand our team and also get to know what TYS is currently doing within the Cambodia young people.
Creep while you and me repeat. This bittersweet heat is suffocating. I'm waiting and always hesitating. Kryptonite desires set my heart afire. Heart on fire. Set my heart afire.
My name is Lim Chai. I'm a co-founding chapter leader of the Young SEAkers Cambodia.
Hi everyone, this is Katie, co-founding chapter leader of the Young SEAkers Cambodia.
TYS Cambodia will be a new and creative initiative in my country.
We are very much looking forward to providing more opportunities
where we connect experts and young people into an open discussion on various issues happening in ASEAN and China community.
And to connecting ASEAN and China youth across the region.
Set my heart afire.
A unity of potential future change maker.
A well-known youth led organization that sparks positive change.
Local vibrant and passionate ASEAN youth.
Potential youth in the region.
A trusted and strategic partner.
Diversity and inclusiveness.
Diverse, energetic, and youthful vibe.
Thank you so much, Chai. So once again, welcome both our speaker and our participant today for spending time on this Sunday evening to join our webinar, which talk about the Southeast Asia education during the post-pandemic world. So before we start our discussion, I would like to invite Chai, our co-leader, to give a short opening remark.
Thank you, Nasa. So can you hear me? Right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. And I'm very delighted to present in this webinar. And first of all, I would like to show my gratitude and appreciation to our two special speakers in today's webinar, Vikrant and Monica joining us from Singapore. And as well as our committed participants, both in Zoom meeting and watching us online on Facebook live stream. So I thank you very much for your time and your commitment. I know it is Sunday night. And so this also reflects your spirit and your enthusiasm of dedicating yourself in education, right? Because education is the main theme of today's discussion. And all of you here deserve a big applause from us, the Young SEAkers team. And let me just begin by giving all of you a short background of the Young SEAkers Cambodia. So basically the Young SEAkers, in short, TYS, was established in Singapore last year and currently has set up 8 national chapters across Southeast Asia. And we will complete 10 national chapters across Southeast Asia by the end of this year. Cambodia was the second country to open this national chapter, and our vision is to move and create a new generation of ASEAN China Savvy youth leaders. And our main mission is to build a regional community of passionate seekers and provide them with the complementary programs to maximize their cross-border competencies. For your information, seekers itself is a self-explanatory term. It is a homonym of the term seekers, like seek for something, right? ASEAN youth. So we define that it's as ASEAN youth who actively seeks for China ASEAN opportunities in Southeast Asia, and who are well equipped with a cross-border competency and relevant soft skill to navigate through the region, and they're all a part of the Young Seekers community. As you can see, today's webinar is our monthly webinar, and it's also one of the flagship programs of the TYS Cambodia called Seekers in Dialogue. And in this monthly dialogue, we try to engage distinguished ASEAN and China experts and leaders from business, politics, governments, and academia to share their insights with the seekers. And this dialogue session are a venue for the meeting of minds, connecting seekers to the mover and shakers of the region. So today's topic is an interesting one, as we are concerned about the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on education in Southeast Asia and beyond. So according to ASEAN Rapid Assessment, in ASEAN region alone, school closure affected the quality of education received by more than 152 million children and youth. Therefore, I'm very much looking forward to hearing our speaker perspective about education and COVID-19 pandemic impacts, as well as the interactive discussion from our participants today. Without further ado, I would like to make my speech very short here, and I would like to also hand over my floor to our colleagues, NASA. And thank you very much, everyone, once again for joining. Yes.
Thank you so much for Chai for a very insightful opening remark. So I will be your moderator as well as your host today. And my name is Nasa, and I am currently a program co-lead with in TYS Cambodia. So before we begin our discussion, I would like to introduce two of our prestigious speaker, Mr. Vikrant. He's have the 8 years in teaching, and as well as public speaking skill. And Bob Vikrant is right now a graduate research assistant at the Purdue University at United States. And Monica is a co-founder of the Career Contact, which is a startup based in Singapore, which focus on the student technology skill development. And she is also a doctoral student for Columbia University in United States as well. So to begin our discussion for today, since our topic talk about the education during the post-pandemic world, I just want to open a question regarding to the education respectively in your own country. So since both of you have the experience, like I can say many years in education field, my question would be that what are the major changes that you see in an education field in your respective country? And this question may start from Mr. Vikrant first. What are the major changes that you see in your education system in Cambodia? And then we move the question to Monica.
Okay, thank you for this very good question to begin with. Yes, let me tackle this question from two distinct perspectives, because I have been a university lecturer and a program manager at one school during the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was hard for everyone. From the perspective of a teacher, we had to carry out our teaching, even though we had to change from face-to-face to doing it online. So at the very start, I think everyone was struggling with what platform to use, how to do that, how to inform students. But thankfully, we have been quite familiar with social media. So everyone was connected somehow. Yes, it would have been a disaster if everyone had not been in contact already. So the good thing is that we had some social media networks like Facebook and Messengers that we could inform our students. But as a program manager, we face bigger problems because we had to be responsible for more stakeholders. Yeah, we had parents, we had young children, we had adults, and we had adolescents, and all of them had different challenges. Some struggle with the tools, some struggle with the methods, and some struggle with the mindset shift, and some struggle financially. Yeah, so all of these different challenges, and I love to touch upon some of them as we move through this discussion. So to begin with, I think like what COVID-19 caused so far is that everyone in the stakeholder gets affected somehow. And this is the kind of global challenge that we meet, and it's very fresh and it's really frustrating to a certain degree. Yeah, so let's hear from the other speaker.
Yeah, thanks so much for explaining a bit more. Yeah, I think for me, so I'm based in Singapore at the moment. I would say I'm most familiar with what's going on in Singapore right now. I think in terms of how like the education system has changed, or that people are, more aware about, it's like navigating online, so online remote learning, but then also navigating blended learning, so meaning a mix of both online and in-person aspects. Because I think there is kind of a common consensus from the government and from just on the ground, the masses, that I think online learning is going to be here to stay, and just COVID-19 just expedited it. So last year in 2020, there was like a huge shift, right? From suddenly emergency remote teaching, everyone went online. Yes, people figuring out what to use platforms wise, but actually in 2018, so the Singapore government and the Ministry of Education had already rolled out a learning management system called the Student Learning Space. So this is actually for all public schools in Singapore to use. So the teachers and students have access to it. So so that was already a few years ago, but it wasn't used as extensively. And then now in 2020, because of COVID, suddenly, everyone had to use it. And so I think there's been a big push towards, being familiar with the platform, developing features on the platform, providing more professional development for teachers on how to use the platform well for their lessons and for communicating with students. So I think there is also a lot more appreciation that we also have this system. I mean, it's not perfect. It's gonna, there'll be iterative changes along the way, but like this is at least like a thing that we have nationally that everyone can be working on to improve it in the future. Yeah. I think that is one. So like that's like online versus blended learning. Another aspect that I saw is more discussion on just student assessment. So Singapore is pretty much very exams based all throughout the past years, and I think because so many tests were suddenly canceled, people weren't sure, like, do we still sit for the final exam like at the end of the term or at the end of the year? So I would say Singapore in general has done pretty well curbing the number of COVID cases that schools are able to reopen. So, students are in school and then they can take the final exams. But I think there has been a lot of discussion about, are tests still the right way to go? Can we assess students differently? Can we use more like feedback process oriented assessment methods rather than just grade-based tests at the end of a module, at the end of a term? So I'm really glad that these, conversations are happening, because I personally feel that, there are many other ways of assessment, and assessment for learning rather than assessment for like mastery of a certain skill that we can think about together. Yeah. So yeah, this is
and Monica. So my second question would goes to Monica. Since you mentioned a lot about technology, and you yourself is a co-founder of the startup that is provides technology skill development to students. So during even before and during the pandemic, like how do you see the relationship between technology and education? I mean, like, have education accelerate, have technology accelerate education, and what are the major challenges that you face so far within the use of the technology in education field?
Yeah, so I think okay, so there were quite a few questions in that question. So yes, I think there is definitely a relationship between education and technology. I think technology has definitely pushed education forward a lot more, but at the same time, there are the cons of it, in that technology has also increased the gap between different, groups of students based on potentially like socioeconomic factors. So there are both. It's pros and cons. So yeah, I would say technology is definitely super important, just because we are, I mean, there's a whole rhetoric of the future of work. So, more work is becoming like every industry is going to have technology in it. And, we need to teach our students or our next generation how to use technology properly and be able to, to be skilled for these like jobs in the future that we might not even know about. So I think like in that sense, like the education and the workforce and then plus technology, they're all kind of interlinked, which is pretty much like what actually the startup that I co-founded does. So at Career Contact, our mission is to provide digital skills development for youth around high school to tertiary level. And we focus on just 3 pillars for now. So user experience, web development, and digital marketing, because we see these pillars as, fundamentals to pretty much every industry that is digitizing. Yeah. And then, we match these students who have learned like basics of these skills to help SMEs. So SMEs are small, medium enterprises that want to digitize, that may lack some power digitizing, so that these students are like constantly practicing the skills that they have learned. So that's kind of the model that Career Contact goes by. Yeah. But yeah. And I think there was another portion of your question that I might not have answered at the moment. But yeah.
The last question would be about the major challenges in, say, converting the technology in education field.
Sorry, in converting, you mean?
I mean, like it's like connecting the technology in education field. Like, what are the challenges that you come so far?
I see. So, I mean, there are definitely logistical challenges where, like, say, a school is not well equipped to like provide, like, say, if the shift is very sudden, a school may not be well equipped in terms of the hardware or curriculum, things like that. I think these are logistical challenges that I think pretty much everyone would experience. I think I kind of mentioned just now, like in terms of like technology widening the gap or the access for students of different backgrounds. I would say in Singapore, at least, because we are 100% urban, we are a very small country, the gap is not as wide. Nearly every student has like access to good Wi-Fi. The schools are equipped to a certain extent with basic laptops and iPads, things like that. So I would say I'm not seeing it as much in Singapore, but I have heard from, friends in other Southeast Asian countries, especially like what you get in a city versus a peripheral town versus in the rural areas is very, very different. So yeah, and I figured you all at Cambodia probably have more experience than I do in terms of navigating like this big, like, widening gap in technology and then access to that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Monica. And that leads to another question, talking about the education gap within the, let's say, pandemic period, where students move their education, say, there's every single education curriculum to online or say remote study. So in this case, the next question will talk about the Southeast Asia online learning. So as the question would go first to Mr. Vikrant, that do you think that the online learning in Southeast Asia at the moment is really inclusive enough for students, or simply say, is it really provide equity for everyone or every student from middle school to high school?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. When it comes to inclusiveness and equity, I don't think we are confident to say that 80 countries in the world has that bold confidence to say that it's now for everyone. And the only place we see such claim is in UNESCO documents, because we are striving toward this just an ideal world. And it's not a bad thing to have a big dream and to lift the quality of life of everyone. But if we take a look at Southeast Asian context, we would see that different countries are at different levels, and education and technology are just part of the many things that we have to care about. Let's say now I am curious about how to improve my online learning. Suddenly natural disaster happens and my attention suddenly shifts to that because it's more related to survival than education. Yeah, so I think when it comes to equity and inclusivity, we cannot claim that we have reached an ideal place where everyone is happy, because we could see it. I think it's not that hard to gather evidence. Just look around, wherever it is, we can see inequality and all of this. And we are working toward it from different angles, some through dialogue, some through policy action, some through like some other small initiatives. Yes, and I would love to link this question to a very broad framework that I always use. Like as a child, I used to watch ancient Chinese Kung Fu movies, and we normally see like a guy, like very innocent, only with a dream, or probably when life crushed that person to the bottom and that person didn't know what to do, went to the Shaolin temple, yes, in hope of education. So now we in the Shaolin temple, you see different people, and some master the hard skills, but what set out the master from the rest of the people is that they have something in them, which is an identity as a master. And when we conceptualize education and technology in this kind of way, I would say we have to tackle it from different levels, like at the level of tools and functions. Let's say we learn Zoom, we learn Teams, and all of these different platforms. But that is not enough. The next level is methodology. How do we teach people the methods to use it in a way that is efficient and effective so that they get access to information and do not get overwhelmed by it, right? So in the Chinese Kung Fu movie, that equals to the person who teach you first when you go in there. It's just methods. Okay, here is the weapon and here's the method. The next one is epistemology, which is the knowledge systems. Now, we all have identity. As a teacher, I have a set of knowledge systems that I have to get familiar with so that I am relevant in my community of teachers. Yeah, so in Chinese Kung Fu movie, it would be the close disciple of the master. That person will just tell you, okay, different Bibles or different books you need to read. At the last level of the master's level, that is ontology. And in the course I teach, we have a concept called ontological shock, which is an effect of rapid identity shift. And this is what we are experiencing right now. So education and technology has these different levels. So it depends on how we tackle it and then merge it together, then it comes with different kinds of complexity. Yeah, so this is just a framework that we can think about, and we can multiply it and do the math. And we will see different combinations like educational technology, technology education, innovation, creativity, and it just goes on like that. A lot of different things. That's why we need different people, especially youth, to join the dialogue, because we all may see things from different angles, and that is a good thing. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vikrant. It's a lot of to take in from the research, from research aspect of the education and also. And so I would like to turn the question to Monica as well. What do you think about the equity and inclusiveness in terms of online learning in Southeast Asia?
Sure, yeah. I think definitely agree with what Vikrant has just said. Like, I think it was a really nice framework and analogy actually with the Kung Fu master. But yeah, I think I agree. Like, I think we still have a long way to go in terms of inclusivity and equity, because yeah, I mean, as I mentioned just now, I mean, with more technology, it could also widen the gap between like access to education. So I think, we need to constantly like think about that and think how to mitigate that. I mean, in terms of like other areas also, it's not just learning about like content or like access to content, learning skills. A lot of it is also like just social emotional learning, mental health. I think these are also areas that sometimes it might be hard to get across through technology. So, there are still, I think people are experimenting. I've seen a lot of like new tech startups or ways into doing like telecommunication methods in terms of like health or mental health and SEL, social emotional learning. But yeah, I think this is still pretty nascent. It's new for everyone. And yeah, so I'm very excited to see where all this is going though. Yeah.
Thank you. So I have another question that also still related to online learning. So since we all move our education into let's say remote way, and in this case, students they have less opportunity to join in physical event or physical activity that they usually do at school. And in this point, I just want to know how can students use this technology platform as a chance for themselves to be more competitive? Or my question is that how can they turn this technologies or remote learning to improve themselves as the same way that they do when they had a physical class before the pandemic? And this question, I think Monica could answer first.
Wait, so to repeat your question, as how the students are, what can they do like with
Yes.
in remote settings?
Yes, in order to like to be to extend their own skill and to be able to compete in the global level, like they did when they have the physical class.
I see. Yeah. So I think through remote learning, so if I would say remote learning, it's usually a bit more passive. Either you're watching a video, you're just listening directly to your teacher. I think in terms of like being, I think, you know, a student, in order for a student to learn, they need to be actively participating. So if like say a remote learning environment can be made in a way that's more interactive. So I know a lot of teachers now love using like breakout rooms, or they use like some little games in their classroom so as to like, you know, like if it's a very quick quiz or something like that, just to get the students, you know, responsive or answering something so that they're thinking back about the material. I think these are little efforts that are little actions that, you know, can go a long way in terms of like retention. But yeah, but I mean, like thinking of like just remote settings, if what I've seen that I think works pretty well is that yeah, so the student may learn a certain like content online, but they're doing a project on their own. Like it could be at home, it could be with their neighbor, with their sibling. So it's, you know, it's not like with the whole class that they usually do in school, but it's something a bit more hands-on that they can do at home. Sometimes they use recycled materials. They use whatever materials that they can find in their community. They can group, you know, actually be very creative about that. And say, you know, if that relates to like a science concept that they just learned about in their lesson, then that helps them to, I think, retain the knowledge and apply it also. And through that process, they might find out like, oh, you know, this science concept that I learned today, it relates to another science concept I learned 3 weeks ago. And, you know, they can start forming these connections. So yeah, I think it's a mix of, you know, using what the technology platform provides, but also, you know, wherever you are at, what you can get your hands on to, and just being creative about that. Yeah. That actually kind of ties in a little to maker education, which is like my doctoral work. Yeah. But yeah, so that's why I thought of it, and have seen some teachers be pretty like creative about coming up with projects that are done like offline, with although the content has been shared online. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I also would love the idea from Mr. Vikrant on the same question as well.
Okay, thank you. And I really agree with Monica on the concept of creativity, because this is necessary for survival. We are at different levels. So if we are in a certain environment, we may not have access to technology. And to ask a question, how can technology help you if you don't even have access, is actually irrelevant. But what changes also remains unchanged. What I mean by this is that now we change from face-to-face learning to remote learning, online, hybrid, blended learning, all of these different words. What doesn't change is learning. The noun doesn't change. It only changes the adjective. So learning is still learning. If students don't have access to the digital platforms, well, of course, they need to find a way to afford that if they are struggling financially, or maybe the local authority can help with that. But another one is they have to find an alternative way of learning through books, through discussion, through all of these, form a small group. And if we cannot meet just just keep a distance, something like that, under the tree on the large groups. This is very traditional because recently I've been reading a book, Deep Work by Carl Newport. Yes, in a world where technology is all over the place, it's hard for us to go deep on a specific subject. So what I do in my class is that I use my framework earlier. I always say, okay, what tools are we going to use? And we just spend a session on that right up front. Okay, here are the tools we will use. Here is how you will ask me questions. Here's how I will respond. Here is the scheduling process and all of these. Try to make sure the administrative part is okay. Yes, and then we move on to the methodology, like what methods will we use in this course? How frequently do you have to go online? How frequently do you have to work on your own? What kind of materials will you do and how you will do it? And normally we do this in a small group sessions like breakout rooms. And then the most challenging things are the last two parts, like in the Kung Fu movie is when you meet the close disciple of the master and the master himself. The close disciple always say, now to be qualified as a Shaolin monk, read 10 books, right? And if we tell this to students, and of course, Monica can relate to this because she is quite ahead of me. She is a doctoral candidate. There are certain things that we have to read and get familiar with in our subject. Even though we agree with it or not, we just have to read. There are researchers, there are seminal works. So I believe students in Cambodia really do not buy in this concept yet. They believe that whatever the curriculum tells them, they learn this, they pass the exam, and that's it. Well, that is just the entry point. We have to get very familiar with the field we are in, whether it's technology, education, finance, auditing, to know what are the typical conversations people normally have in this field and what are the edge of the conversation, because those are the innovative parts. The last one, the master figure in the Shaolin movie, is the identity. Of course, students go to school, we have like 100 or thousands of students, but we don't want to have 1,000 individuals who think the same way and do the same thing. Upon graduation, we want diversification. So they themselves have to find out what is their obsession or what is their goal in learning, what do they want to do, and how to set themselves apart from other students. And if they can do this, curriculum instruction, even their test score means something else to them. Let's say if I want to become a teacher and I do well on the methods class and I don't do really well on psychology class, then I know what to do with that, as opposed to me not having any goal. Then I don't know how to interpret my score. So what Monica mentioned about creativity and assessment is very crucial, and it will take on a special meaning when individual students have individual goals to go for. Okay.
Thank you so much for very like interesting and insightful from both Mr. Vikrant and Monica, talking about the creativity and putting more said impact from the input from the student regarding the online learning. So since we keep discussing about the education during the post-pandemic, which is our main theme today. And so regarding to the this online remote learning and pandemic, let's say remote study during this pandemic, what are the major lessons that we could gain from this pandemic that make students shift to remote learning? Like what are the major say lesson learned that we could take out from the 1 year of remote study or remote learning? So I think Mr. Vikrant, you could go first.
Okay, there are a lot of lessons we can learn, yeah, because we are at different levels here, but I would like to highlight a few of them that fascinated me. I am also a live event facilitator of an open program. It's an online global network of English language teachers. Yes, we try to link professionals from all over the place. And we have a course called MOOC, M-O-O-C, Massive Open Online Course. And there has been a lot of discussion that MOOC is not going to replace university. Yes, when virtual education was first introduced, people were really skeptical. Like, well, MOOC can never replace face-to-face communication. And of course, MOOC cannot replace it, but COVID-19 can. I think this is the first lesson that is right in our face, right? Technology that we see as an antagonist in this area, that to some conservative educators, they see technology as an antagonist, like they distract students and students cannot stay focused because of technology. So technology doesn't have a place in education. But with COVID-19 as a new enemy, and when you are fighting a bigger enemy, your current enemy becomes your friend. So now educator and technology people can sit together in a table and discuss policy, something that we rarely see. Because as me, myself in language teaching, whenever I need to learn something, it's hard for me to look for fellow educators who know. I have to look for my friends in technology, maybe like Monica, because she knows she has the insider knowledge of that kind of thing. And this type of conversation was not so common before the pandemic, but now people are just more open-hearted. Yes, of course, I do not wish that the pandemic would stay that longer, but on this specific point, I believe that the pandemic is necessary for what we call forced innovation. Like technology is not the enemy. They are the tools, they are the saviors, and now we need them and we can sit and discuss. And the other one I want to talk about is that students have to rely on themselves. Teachers have to rely on themselves for now. Students cannot rely on teacher for motivation. Well, motivation may be crucial, but at the end of the day, discipline wins everything. And I hope our students can keep this in mind whenever they face challenges. It's discipline that solves problem, not motivation. Like with motivation, you solve problems psychologically, but not realistically. Yes. So these are my two takes on it.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the one on discipline and like self-regulation and just being, proactive. Yeah, I think these are, soft skills that will go a long way for any student. Yeah. And to have that, inculcated when the student is young, that's very important. Yeah. I think some major lessons, I think Vikrant has already mentioned a number of good ones, but I think at least maybe what I've felt so far is that parents have a huge role to play, and I think parents themselves didn't realize it also. I'm personally not a parent, but I've heard from many friends who are parents, and teachers who work very closely with parents, especially parents of younger children, like primary school students. Yeah, I think they have a huge role to play in terms of, shaping how remote learning looks like for their child also. So yeah, I mean, I think at least in the educator community, it has been known for ages that parents play a huge role. But I think right now parents really know that they have to like step up to the game too, but also they know how hard being a teacher is. Yeah. So I think yeah, it's a good thing for both parties to really understand about each other's jobs. Yeah. Actually, like in Singapore, the Ministry of Education actually has a whole like parent kit on their website to guide parents, give them ideas about, how to manage remote learning at home, how to help your kids, understand what, like so many different things on like transitions from primary to secondary school, all these kind of things. So, but yeah, I just dropped that link in the chat actually. So yeah. So I think that's one. And then I think I'll add another one on like just flexibility and that just the mindset of constant learning and lifelong learning. So I realize when kids get onto like more online platforms, so some of them, their teachers might introduce like Khan Academy to them, and then they're like, "Whoa, wow, okay, I can do so many modules if I complete like whatever my teacher told me already, but I wanted to see what's the next module. I can go ahead and look at it and see what's up with that. And maybe they take a bigger interest in that subject along the way if they're able to pace their own learning. So I think it's kind of related. So like the mindset of like lifelong learning, upskilling, and then also being flexible. Yeah. So yeah, I think these would be my two major lessons. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And from my side, I only have one question less. It's still regarding to the pandemic. So we discussed a lot about the remote learning, about the equity, inclusiveness, and also lesson learned that we could take away from this remote learning that start in 2020 since the pandemic become global. So it seems like there's a lot of changes, and there will be changes regarding our education system. Either it involves technology or by physical means. So in this case, just idea from both of you as someone who is experienced in education, what the future of learning may look like to you as someone who is experienced in this field. Like what may be the future of learning look like that, and now we moving from physical mean to the remote learning, and what may change in the future, what it might look like. And I think Mr. Vikrant could answer this one first.
Yes, when it comes to thinking about the future, it's very hard to do it scientifically. Yes, because now we probably need a lot of data to do that, and we need a lot of methods. But from my personal perspective, I would say that education will change, and COVID-19 is just one of the main challenges that we face. Of course, COVID-19, nobody foresee that. And the only thing that doesn't change is change itself, like the quote from Martin Luther King. So I would say that, of course, the adjective before the word learning will change, whether it's blended, whether it's flipped classroom, because educators have been talking about this for decades before the pandemic. It just did not come about at all. The word blended learning was not a new term that was just emerged during the pandemic. It has been around for quite a while. It just didn't get the significance, and it didn't get popular. With COVID-19, suddenly blended learning becomes a household term that everyone can say and know what it means. So the concept of flipped classroom, blended learning, it has been here for a while, but it didn't happen until Global 19 took it a step further, and people have no choice. So I would say the methods will change, and change will not come easy, because we all have epistemology, we all have knowledge systems, we all have traditional ways of doing things that change really hard, because people sometimes refuse to change because they fear of being irrelevant. Let's say if I don't know Zoom or any technology, and it's very hard for me to be relevant in this modern era. That is the frustrating aspect. And I'm sorry to see some of my fellow educators, like they just give up the education field during this time and move away to other sectors, because the problems are just too hard and they don't want to be here when they are seen as irrelevant. Yes, but what doesn't change, however, is learning. And if we keep on the learning part, if we have a goal and we can just change the methods, the good thing about focusing on learning is that we don't treat the change as something frustrating, because we know our goal is the same. I want to learn something new. I want to add value to the marketplace. I want to be relevant with my fellow professionals. I want to be someone who has something to say. And with this in mind, whatever we do just become important, but it's not too important that it overwhelms us and then kills our spirits of learning. So whatever changes that we cannot foresee in the future, I would say everyone has to be self-regulated, and learning has to be personalized, because without that, education is just empty. And I would explain more on that when we go to one of the audience questions in the chat box. Yeah, but it's all for now.
Yeah, great. Definitely really agree about like personalization and self-regulated learning. I think those things are here to stay, and you know, it's not gonna like change rapidly, or not rapidly, but like drastically, but these are just things to be kept at a constant and, you know, gradual pace. But yeah, I think for me, in terms of like, you know, how COVID, I guess, has impacted, or how the sudden rise in edtech has impacted learning. I know that there's been a lot of discussion on the implementation of artificial intelligence techniques in edtech tools. And because, you know, COVID last year suddenly every school was trying to find edtech tools and all that to use. And so there was a lot more investment also in the edtech market. And then a lot of more startups like started going into like, okay, so we need to use edtech in some way and somehow for our features. So yeah, there's this whole, like discussion on, and I think like everyone is still trying to figure it out because I think that, different governments have different views on like data management and privacy. Is it going to be like privately owned by all these companies that collect data? These are also data for usually minors, and these are children under 18. So, how are we going to regulate that? Like no one has a clear like answer yet. Yeah. So I think like this whole other like there's also like the ethical side of things, a lot of ethical concerns. So yeah, there's this whole discussion in itself. But I think and another segment of it is also that these tools at the end of the end of the day still need to be human centric. So focused on the student, on the learner, and also focused on the teacher. So we can't, although AI sounds cool and sexy and everything, like is it really going to help the student learn better and the teacher do their work better? And I think these are just questions that we all need to think about as researchers, designers, educators, and the whole community. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I see this as a huge change. I mean, I know that at least in Singapore, the Ministry of Education has been really identifying areas in where they can insert AI to optimize and automate different activities. So one big one up there is like automated essay scoring. It's been a lot of time for a teacher to score essays, and now that actually they've amassed a lot more data, I think they're trying to build a system where it can automatically score an essay to about the accuracy of a human. So a human teacher. So, and I think they're still working on it. It's not foolproof yet. Yeah, but that's one area. Another area is adaptive learning. So I think Vikrant mentioned like personalized learning, but this is more like, I think, using AI to personalize it even more in terms of content or levels. Research has been done in this field since a few decades ago. Like there's a whole field called intelligent tutoring systems, but I think it's only now that like at least the governments are looking into it a lot more. There are companies that do it already, but I would say in schools at least hasn't been implemented as much. So I'm curious to see how it will grow in schools. Yeah. Will it be like widespread? Will it be like every student will have like an intelligent tutoring sort of like feature in their system? And like, how is that going to affect their learning too? I'm not sure. So there are varied results also in the field. So yeah, but yeah, that's my response for now. Oh, I see a lot of people are.
Yes, that is a good thing.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I think we can conclude the question from my side already and open the floor to our participant who's already asked quite good questions. So I think our very first question would goes to both Mr. Vikrant and Monica, as the our participant didn't specify who the question is for. So the question is, the first question is from Sokmom. And the question is that how shall I motivate my student to participate in studying online more? So I assume our participant who asked this is a teacher or educator. So the first question will go to both of our speaker. And I want one more question as well. And this one is specifically for Mr. Vikrant. And our participant, Pana, the question would be regarding the technology learning, technology awareness in Cambodia. As the participant mentioned in the chat box that since we moving to online remote learning, it's somehow difficult or challenge for student and teacher in Cambodia, because not everyone or both the teacher and the student equipped with the technology knowledge or digital skill to process or to take in those kind of remote learning. So in this case, our participants just want to ask, what are the suggestions to this all kind of problem? The fact that teacher and student have no fully awareness of the technological skill and all those kind of digital learning that are new to them in the Cambodian context. So I think we could answer first question by giving it to the Monica first.
Okay, so for the first question on motivating students to participate in online, yeah. I think it's there are challenges to that because participating and studying online just feels different. You're not with your friends, you're not with your classroom, you don't have that togetherness sense. But potentially I can think of some ways at least, like setting up more like designated maybe small group sessions, or like sessions where students can meet one another and be working together on something at the same time that might give them a better sense of like community. I do realize also this suggestion from like Pana's question that Cambodia may not have stable internet connection and all that, so how is that even going to work? So yeah, in terms of like if technology is not going to facilitate that, are students able to just gather a couple of siblings or neighbors and be working on things together, and have like a prompt or something that they like, maybe a little small project, a small assignment, so that at least they're keeping themselves accountable with each other. Yeah. That's one thing I can think of at the moment, but I'll hand it over to Vikrant right now first. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have 2 questions right now, and I really wish the second question didn't have the direct address to me, so that we could also benefit from Monica's insight. Right, the first question, how should I motivate my students? Well, first of all, before I go to how I do it myself, I would like to say that the word motivation, it comes from 2 words combined together. To me, that's how I see it: motive and activation. And we have to be careful because not all motives deserve to be activated. For example, some motives are just wrong and it leads you to a place where you're not effective and efficient, like motive to be lazy or motive to procrastinate. So when we motivate students, we have to know what kind of motive do we want to activate in them. Of course, we want passions for learning. We want them to be persistent with the problems. So the way I tackle motivation, yes, but I'm a fan of discipline rather than motivation, because sometimes we just have to do things even though we don't feel like doing it. But when it comes to motivation, I can share what I have learned from positive psychology. There are 3 main aspects that we can use to motivate our students. The first one is meaning. Meaning is really important. If there is no meaning in their learning, then it doesn't make sense whether how much we try to motivate them, because they don't see the meaning of doing that, right? What's the point of reading? And it's hard to have a personalized meaning, because most of the meaning we get as we grow up is cliche, like education help you escape poverty. With education, you can find a good job. There is nothing wrong with those kind of wisdom. However, it has been overused and it has been abused to a certain extent, to the point where it doesn't mean anything and it doesn't help us attach meaning to what we do. So the first thing you have to think about as a teacher, what is the meaning of my course? What is the meaning of this curriculum? What is the meaning behind it all? It's not the mastery of content, like Monica said. It's not the mastery of readiness for exams and letting it all go away once you are done with the exam. Education is not a means of escape like that. Yes, most of the students just want to escape from education as early as possible so that they can relearn everything when they go to the working place. This is the motive we would like to destroy. Right? It's not the way to escape from education into the real world of work and relearn everything. We have to see the connection between the 2. So the first one is meaning. The second is engagement. They have to master the ability to stay focused and to concentrate on the subject matter. Because if students want to tackle something difficult, they need a lot of focus to do that. And especially more difficult to us than our ancestors, because we have technology all over the place. It's hard to stay focused. So find a way to let students work alone and focus on the problem. Try not to jam them with content or information. And especially if you teach higher level, you can do it in the form of assignments. Do not require them to do a lot of assignments, just one key assignment that they stay engaged throughout the course. And if it's with young children, it's through projects, something that they work like an artist. They stay with it through trial and errors. And then at the end of the course, they have the finished product, right? And the third tools that we can use is joy or pleasantness. Well, it's also a matter of teacher personality. Like to me, I love to be fun. So it's easy to connect with my students because I also know what kind of conversations that are going on social media. So I can always say something relevant to what they know. And so if a teacher wants to be relevant in the classroom, they just have to know what type of conversation students like to learn, what type of keywords that are popular right now, so that we can use this to make the class more joyful and pleasant and more human connection, because now we share the certain conversations that we all see around us. Yeah, so this is just a brief version of what I would like to share. Think about the meaning of the course, think about the engagement of the activities, and think about the joy of interactions, the rapport between teacher and students. And for the second questions, yes, I try to avoid talking for too long, but now let me just do my best. Okay, so now we don't have the infrastructures. So we are not in an ideal conditions, or we're not having favorable conditions to do online learning. So what are my suggestions to this? Well, first of all, I would say don't be scared of problems, because problems are what unite people. Without problems, we don't have culture, we don't have nationality. Yes, think about it. It's a very negative way of viewing life. But without problems, there would be no association of any sort. The reason why we come together as teachers and students, as employees and employers, because we all have something that we are scared of, and we want to solve it all together. So now we have the problems of the lack of infrastructure and technology. This is a good thing, because there are people out there with the same frustration that you can sit down with and talk about. So whatever they do, just learn to adopt the technology. So adoption and adaptation is what is my suggestions. Learn to adopt it. Just adopt it. Start small, like just learn to create email, some small thing like this, and then learn to adapt to it, learn to use it. Yes. And then try to avoid overlapping between technology and human connections. For example, if students have to read something, let them read and use the Zoom call for discussions, rather than come on Zoom and let students read individually, because this will just consume the valuable internet connection and the time we have. Yeah, so think about adoption and adaptation. That would be my suggestions about the problem.
Yeah, and I can also jump in also actually for the question from Pana. So I am drawing like from some of my experiences when I was liaising with a Brazilian teacher. So she was I would say she wasn't in very great conditions where, you know, she like Wi-Fi was not good. The school didn't have Wi-Fi. She has a 3G phone, but her, you know, students don't get her messaging very well, things like that. I think Vikrant made a good point on like, you know, like problems, like people reunite because of problems. So I think having like, I think this mindset on like Cambodia is not ready for this, not ready for that. I think it's a bit of a deficit mindset, and that, you know, you can reframe like, so if we don't have this and we don't have that, then what innovative ways can we come up with so that you know, we can come around, like, you know, we don't have to use solutions that are, you know, like out there and about. So we need to come up with a new solution. And I have seen like I think there was a Filipino teacher group that kind of just exploded because of COVID. It was on, I think, on Facebook. Like so many teachers joined that group. They share information. They share like even motivational things with each other. And along that way, maybe in the comment section, if someone posts a question, people might answer with interesting things that they have done with their students. And I think potentially other teachers, other teacher peers can be more creative about, solving certain problems that they have in their own communities that might be similar to yours. So I think it's a lot about, connecting with peers, finding ideas together to solve, problems that, you and others have felt. So yeah. But yeah, changing the mindset is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Such insightful answer for the question. And I personally also learned a lot today, especially the thing about discipline and motivation and yes, all this kind of stuff. And we have 2 more questions from our participant. Actually, and I see the question from Chandrot. Do I pronounce your name right? Actually, we also encourage the participant to unmute themselves and ask the our speaker directly so that we could create an interaction. So can the other 2 participants that just drop their question in unmute and ask our speaker? Are you comfortable with that? I'm not sure if the participants are okay with the unmuting and question. So I got one question from Chandrot. The participant asked, it's first for the strategy regarding education in Southeast Asia during this pandemic and specifically stated for Cambodia. The participant mentioned that we can see the high percentage of inequality in accessing to education keep increasing. So what the question would be, what are the strategies to cope up with this increasing inequality in accessing to education? And I think this question is similar to what we just discussed before about equity and also inclusiveness, right? And one more question is from Hong Kong. The participant want both of our speakers to share the way that students could get most from the online learning. So there will be 2 questions. One about the strategy regarding the tackling the inequality in online learning. And another question is about the way that how can students get most from their online learning. And I think the question was to go to both speaker as well. And I think Monica, you can start first. You can
Sure.
answer or what?
Right. So the first question was, what are the strategies to reduce inequality in access to education? Yeah, that's a very, very broad one. And that is very structural also. I mean, there are many things I'm sure that the governments have been working on already. Like I know in Singapore, at least, inequality and inequity to access, at least, I think I would say like definitely reaching out to groups that are more vulnerable. So like children with disabilities or even children from lower income groups, from minority groups in Singapore also. I think at least in the COVID, during COVID, when Singapore was in like complete lockdown, when all the schools were like online, I think it was most obvious who the students that needed the most help was. And I would say, yes, in Singapore, it's a much smaller number. It's just a very small percentage of students who absolutely don't have Wi-Fi, could not even get their hands onto a laptop, have no phone. So, in that way, like the school community, like directly provided for them. I think that there were, some very dedicated teachers who could just be with them during those times. But I think like on a broader scale, I mean, these are just like, there are, I don't know, like it's a very, I think there are just many levels to it, and it really differs for different countries because we all have different like histories, different politics. I think these are all intertwined to how inequality even manifested. So yeah, I would say it's like a much larger, I don't know, issue to tackle in itself. Yeah, and it's not just for education. Yeah. I'll just stop there first. But yeah, Vikrant.
Okay, so let me share Yeah, my first question on inequality. Yes, Monica is right. Government has been working on it. And if you take technology in education, education without technology, of course, technology is a neutralizer, but it doesn't look like so when we first started. But I want them to see the promise beyond the problems. So now, let's say I am in a place where they lock me out of the room, and I have heard a lot about what people are doing in the room. They are studying all of these different things. They are becoming successful. But then I keep banging on the door, like, open the door for me. I don't have the access. But then the door is open and I'm in there and I'm still lost. Because so far I have never thinking about what they are doing. I'm only thinking about the barrier. So now, of course, in certain areas, I'm sorry to say they don't have access, sometimes zero access to technology. But this does not mean they have zero access to knowledge. That is different. Now, knowledge and education will be relevant, and they are what they need in order to be relevant in the marketplace. So, of course, government is working on the infrastructure. We have NGOs who are working on granting access to people so that they can have the technology needed for their learning. But at the same time, while they are waiting for this, find every way they can, like Monica suggested. Set up a small groups, even discuss with the elderly on the traditional ways of doing things, like the conventional wisdom. It's just a small thing, but once students start to develop themselves like this, and when they have the tool, they become really powerful. In fact, I do suggest that they become educated first before they hold on to technology. Otherwise, it will be the other way around. Technology will just replace us and we become frustrated. Like one of my colleagues usually jokes about, like, students find out how to use other social media platforms by themselves. They don't complain. They can edit the video on TikTok, while some of the teachers cannot do that. It's so complicated and they cannot log in on Zoom. Like that is, yes, yeah, that is a big blow to the understanding of human nature, I would say. Yes. So look at the promises beyond the problems and start small and don't get ready before the time comes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really great. When you brought up social media, then I was like, oh yes, I thought more about more things. So I guess maybe this could relate to, like, where can students gain most from online learning? I think online learning is not just, massive open online courses and not just logging into Zoom to meet your teacher and talk.
Yes.
But yeah, like social media, actually, I was reminded, actually, a couple of my teacher friends, they started social media accounts and then they realized that their high school students follow them a lot more, like are a lot more interactive. They will comment, they will post stuff. And actually, then that in itself could even become like a way of formative assessment or a new way of giving feedback. So it's not like, you submit an assignment to your teacher grades it and like gives you some assignments at the side of your paper or your essay document. It's like, if you're doing a project, you can upload a video, upload a photo, and then your caption can be describing what your learning process was, what your reflection was, what you learned from that. And then people can comment on your posts or your or whatever that you have uploaded. So in that sense, I would say then online learning becomes a bit more fun, it's more social, it's more communicative. And actually that also kind of related to the above question, like how should I motivate my students to participate in like studying online? So they might be incentivized if they get, like, I don't know, more likes or if they get more views for a certain video or more comments. So like I guess reframing how that online learning or interactive environment will look like is, something that could really liven up the classroom and motivate students, to just be a bit more active. But yeah, I actually was I came across that in Cambodia, the Ministry of Education, Youth and Sport, they launched a Cambodian television station during the pandemic for students, I personally actually I looked at the website, but I couldn't understand anything. Yeah, but but I was curious actually, like are teachers using it? Has it been helpful? Um, yeah, how has this rollout been? Yeah.
Yeah, you are right, Monica. It's perfectly correct that the Ministry of Education introduced this kind of technique where teacher provide their learning, remote learning throughout each lesson and aired on TV. And actually, there are two other platform, which is social media, the Ministry of Education Facebook page itself, and one more thing is the radio. Because like we discussed already, that some students who lives in the rural area or who live in the remote area, they couldn't get access to some technological tool and also kind of digital skill that require in order to study online. So they have the television, and also they have this radio to study online. But that is what our Ministry of Education has been done so far. So that. Yes, and we actually have last question, and regarding the way that I think you may have mentioned about this before, but can you just like briefly a very short answer that the way that student could gain most from their online learning? Just a very short question to Mr. Vikrant first, because we already talked about this a lot.
Okay, so my tips on how to get the most from online learning. Yes, I can think of a number of words that start with letter P, like what they do in marketing, but I don't know whether it's 3 or 4. Let's see how I can manage within this short time. So the first one, you need to have a purpose, and it's not just how to get the most of it. It actually makes you very effective if you have a purpose before you attend any class, because your teachers cannot even manage that, because teachers, they only focus on the content of the course. But if you have a purpose, you enter the class, you start the discussions, and you have something to take out of it. Yeah, so first one is to have a purpose, and then they need to know how to prepare themselves. We get the second P, preparation. Just like when we go to the gym, we don't start with intensive workout. We need to do the warm-up. Most of the students don't do the warm-up. They just open Zoom and start. So you cannot focus like this. If you want to get something meaningful out of the lessons, try to get ready for it. Understand yourself. For example, are you a water, coffee, or tea person? What makes you focus? Water, tea, or coffee, right? And if it's something else, let's say Coca-Cola, try to reduce that because it's not healthy. But this is part of the preparation. The study space, is it distracting? Do you have the battery on your device? Because this small thing will cause what psychologists call attention residue. It's hard to reset yourself back into learning when your battery dies out, when there is distracting noise, something that we can manage before the class. The other P I think about is to plan what you want to get at the end of the course, so that from every lessons, your purpose is consistent, and then you can track your own progress, which is the fourth P. Yes, progress. They have to track it and measure it. Otherwise, if they leave it to the test score, it's too long and it's not motivating. If they only get in the top 10, well, try get into the top 5. If you are in the bottom half, try in the top half. Yes, it will be a different feeling, and it's life-changing to do it like that. And it's not bad because you are not trying to compete nastily. You just compete with yourself of getting better, right? So purpose, plan, preparation, progress, and the last one is priorities. Make sure that learning is your priority. Otherwise, you will just live in the illusions that you are studying hard while you are not. Because some of my students, when I say, why don't we set up Facebook for education? In fact, Facebook is working on it. But when we talk about Facebook for education or TikTok for education, they say, no, don't invade my privacy. Okay. I say, oh, now I understand. Your priority is on social media. So education, don't mess with my time. Try to change that. Okay, education is your time, technology should not interfere, and that alone. Yeah, so for now, just the 5P: purpose, plan, progress, preparation, and priority.
Yeah, I really like that. The 5 P is very easy to remember. Yes. Also. And I think like we have mentioned this before, but like that self-regulation part of it, I think is so important. You know, if you can be self-regulated and learn this skill well through this like online and learning community, then it'll take you far. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for today discussion, a very meaningful talk on the pandemic, Southeast Asia education and remote learning. And also I would like to highly appreciate our participant question in here, because it seems like everyone interesting in the discussion, that they keep pouring the question into the chat box. And well, our webinar have come to an end at this time. We would like to discuss more, but we have the time limit in here. And so thank you. I would like to again give my high appreciation to both our speaker, Mr. Vikrant and Monica from Singapore, and all our participants who spend your precious Sunday evening with us today to learn about the education in the pandemic era. And on behalf of my team, I would like to thank you for both the speaker and participant. And here is the end of our webinar for this July. And please follow up TYS page, because we will have the monthly webinar in the upcoming month with a different topic. Thank you, everyone. Very insightful. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so
See ya.
much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.